Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. My name is Shaan Mistry, Product Manager here at Alteryx, and I'm joined by Dara, Canavan, Finance Manager at Quidel, to talk about the catalyst to digital change. So the late, great Clayton Christensen made the observation that companies who are succeeding with their existing processes and business models are actually inhibited from capitalizing on disruptive innovations in their markets due to their own current success. Companies with large sunk costs in legacy technology nearly always have comparable, but sometimes less visible costs in the legacy processes needed to maintain their business models. And this is often accompanied with legacy mindsets, as the culture hasn't really adapted to market needs around customer focus, delivery speed, or even automation. In fact, there's a real inertia around digital transformation because successful companies just assume that they can disrupt the market by adding technology to their stack, rather than actually addressing the end-to-end analytic process itself, including things like the underlying data, the cultural change needed in order to bring the organization on that journey with you, and also a willingness to actually cannibalize existing business models on this journey. We're going to share a new way to take all of those assets from across an organization and actually push them to deliver actionable automated insights. So right now, everything going on in the world, each and every one of us and every business is actually experiencing some form of transformation. In fact, we're seeing a real tension around transformation and how change actually happens. I tend to see two fundamental types of transformation when thinking about business challenges. Firstly, there's innovative transformation, delivering an actual end-to-end state where the business models stay the same, but you find new ways of doing the same thing. Maybe it's now faster, cheaper, or could even come in a new color. You might say that in the year 2020, we're all facing an innovative transformation. Your business models are staying the same, but you're finding new ways to connect the dots in order to achieve your targets and goals. So you're not really intentionally introducing technology to help with this, but as an example, some of those face-to-face interactions that we all took for granted is now a conversation over a web conference call. Secondly, there's disruptive transformation, which will fundamentally change the underlying operating model or actual revenue stream for a business. It's actually been interesting to see businesses change their operating models in the year 2020. In the UK, due to the shortage of hand sanitizer, a gin distillery is using some of its alcohol supplies in order to help combat that shortage. We've even seen large tobacco manufacturers use some of their resources to help investigate the creation of vaccines. An important point, though, one isn't necessarily better than the other, but understanding the options helps you make better decisions so you can see where to intervene and where that change could actually take place. Now, some stats for you: that data-driven organizations utilize data to inform or enhance business processes, enhances things like decision-making and even revenue models. Some of these data-driven businesses systematically and, more importantly, use data in order to power business decisions. According to Forrester, data-driven businesses will earn approximately $1.8 trillion by 2021. However, I think 69% of businesses in the year 2019 have not yet even created a data-driven organization, and only 28% call out that they don't really have a true data-driven culture. So businesses that are data-driven are 77% more likely to exceed their business goals. According to a McKinsey study, they are also 19 times likely to be more profitable. So these businesses don't just use BI to inform their decision making, but they build decision-orientated business models that implement processes and action to deliver faster business outcomes. Companies like Netflix, Amazon, and Google are also great examples of this. Despite the fact that businesses or data-driven businesses will actually outpace their competitors, over 50% of businesses are still not competing on data and analytics. These businesses create a competitive advantage by acting smarter and faster than their competitors. In fact, again, a McKinsey study said that data-driven businesses are 6 times more likely to retain existing customers and 23 times more likely to acquire new customers than their competition. So being data-driven and insight-led becomes a competitive differentiator, creates new opportunities for monetization, and introduces new business models for expanded growth. These businesses must invest in talent. Companies with a highly engaged workforce are seen to be 21% likely to be more profitable than their peers, yet 85% of employees today are not really engaged at work. So employee engagement is not about, do I do my job well? It means that there's a real sense of satisfaction and purpose that comes from the work that's actually being done. And automation really is a key driver to job satisfaction. 74% of employees state that automation improves their job satisfaction. If we think about what that actually means or what it boils down to, it's the value that employees want to know that the work that they're doing is actually seen as valuable to the business and that they themselves are valued. So, manual, mundane processes that can be automated lead to a lack of engagement. So when automation is actually introduced, employees are then free to focus on high-value activities, creating increased engagement and a real sense of purpose. Those data-driven businesses grow at an average of more than 30% annually, which translates to exceeding things like business goals, outpacing the competition, and also delivering a highly engaged workforce. And businesses that want to lead the market have to make that shift of being data-driven and insights-led. So when we think about outpacing the competition, working with kind of agility or even trying to upskill the workforce, all of that can seem like it's out of reach with kind of analytic energy and enthusiasm getting burnt before we even get going. And that's because it's hard to really keep up when 7 hours of your working week goes to manually extracting data from legacy systems and then trying to manually update your data sheets or producing those weekly reports that have somehow become the job rather than actually driving the business forward. And with all this manual intervention and time-consuming rework, it's absolutely no wonder that 60% of us are actually frustrated and fed up with some of the current solutions that are actually in place. So what do a lot of these analytic processes actually look like when we go under the covers? The truth is that sometimes it's actually, more often than not, a fragmented process full of analytic choke points between your teams, legacy technologies, and more importantly, the data. You might have IT using a heavy blend of legacy point solutions, often in control of the data itself. Then you've got IT, data workers, doing the cleansing, preparation, and delivery, leveraging whatever legacy system that they inherited from their predecessors. Then there might be handoffs or blindly throwing it over the wall to other teams, such as geospatial or data science teams, or more involvement from IT in order to handle things like the deployment. And all of this is happening before the insights can be put into the hands of your analysts or your business decision makers. And we tend to see this a lot, using technology designed for maybe a different type of user or left with another team, but they're struggling with the learning or upskilling of the users in order how to use it. And that, of course, is wasting more hours. And why is that? Some of the customers that I speak to inform that it's the way that it's always been because the company got a good package deal. So they are tied into those legacy systems, forced to work in a disconnected or siloed way. Further issues could arise as the technology that these teams use is so fragmented that one legacy technology does not lend itself to another team. That could lead to things like technical debt or, and purchasing of numerous legacy point solutions, causing increased costs across the business as a whole. And as a result of that fragmented culture, a number of questions and challenges start to arise. How can we trust the data being used or delivered? Do we even know where it came from? If not, should we really be classing this as production ready? Who's in charge of the process? If we think that there's a problem, whose job is it to fix? Also, is there any fault tolerance built into the process? If so, what does it even look like? If somebody was to leave, what happens to all of that knowledge? I can't figure out what the existing process does. I know what I'll do. Let me rebuild it so only I can understand it. All of these hurdles are what we see across the business, and it's not only just related to one industry or one line of business. So APA, or analytic process automation, can actually help by solving some of these challenges. Challenges of automating those inputs from, in this case, the far left, everything from traditional data platforms, local files and applications, through to more modern and diverse sources as well, such as process automation bots, data in the cloud, and external business processing logic. Unifying all of those analytical steps by providing users with 260 automation building blocks that can cover the full spectrum of an analytic lifecycle. And because of that tight integration of the components in an APA platform, you can then start to solve from any point and progress from there, automating those analytic outcomes so they can be sent to stakeholders and other business applications on that far right-hand side, or to wherever they are needed. And all of this can be achieved in a single platform that's accessible to all users, that operate in a code-free and a code-friendly way. And I suppose once your analytic processes are built, it doesn't have to stop there. You can then start to scale and automate your processes through self-service scheduling in a centralized way, allowing users to deploy and share their insights safely and securely, and governed all of those analytical assets that can then meet the business needs, either on-premise, in the cloud, or even a hybrid infrastructure. So you then get no more duplication, no more reusing or rebuilding, and then you have real collaboration, allowing you to spend your time on more higher value problems to help drive the business forward. So what I'd like to do now is pass over to Dara to share his insights on how Quidel have adopted the Alteryx APA platform. So Dara, over to you.
Hi Shaan, thanks for having me. So I guess as a starting point in terms of outlining how Quidel is using Alteryx to transform things, it might be useful to just give a quick overview of what the company is and does. So, I mean, it's probably very relevant at the moment, but we're a leader in diagnostic healthcare with a focus on rapid point-of-care testing. This time a year ago, I might have had to do a bit more explaining on what that involves, but I think the impact of COVID, people are quite familiar now with, testing. So I guess to describe it briefly, a lot of the testing that's talked about in the news coverage and so on would be your lab testing, where samples are taken and sent off to a lab. Our company does make those tests, but we also make rapid tests, whereby you can take your sample and run it on one of our instruments where you'll get the result very quickly. So while we produce a wide range of tests covering things from flu to toxicology and cardiac conditions, this year there's been a complete, unprecedented demand because we manufacture coronavirus tests. And in the case of our rapid test, get the results in 15 minutes. So a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today would have been planned, if you like, but I guess COVID-19 has really driven the need to be able to respond quickly for our environment, much quicker than we've ever needed to before. So I guess my role is looking after the commercial finance for the EMEA business, and that's been a new office set up in Ireland to look after the EMEA business, and that came as a result of a major acquisition the company did at the end of 2017. Prior to that, it would have been a predominantly, most of the revenue would have been based in the US, but this acquisition resulted in quite a significant international presence, which prompted the setup of the office. So I guess focusing more on the analytical aspect, and in the context it was an acquisition, that obviously presented quite a number of challenges that needed to be overcome. So the EMEA business essentially completed the transition of the newly acquired business in about a 12-month time span. So during that involved getting to grips with multiple different data sources in different formats, getting to grips with data and identifying where there may be any data gaps, understanding different business practices that were going on in the various markets across the regions and how they would need to be catered for from an analytical perspective. And obviously then commercially, the executive team would have been looking for insights on how the newly acquired business was performing. And then our sales team on the ground similarly would have wanted information to help them in understanding their customers and what was going on in the underlying day-to-day business. So that's all reasonable, but there's a lot of work to get to where you want to go. So in terms of that, the goal, as I would have, I guess, defined it then, would have been we wanted to be in a position where we could answer key business questions at any level of detail instantly, that we can provide the information to the executive that they need to make their strategic decisions. Probably the biggest one in terms of the day-to-day operations would be having the commercial team out there driving the business rather than doing any wading through files and pivot tables, because anyone who's dealt with a commercial sales team would know they want to focus on the day job and not spend their time trying to figure out numbers or sorting data. And ultimately that would lead us to a position where when we have our meeting, we can drive solutions and actions that can be agreed on in the room rather than having to, go looking for numbers and return to topics at a later date. So as the focus was on the commercial aspect, I guess on that, the key metrics we were focusing on is revenue. We also wanted to be able to have good visibility in terms of our opportunity pipeline. When I'm talking about win rate, that's how successful we are at converting that pipeline into Quidel customers. We also have had a lot more of a focus on open orders recently. I guess in the context of the unprecedented demand we're experiencing at the moment, we need to have visibility of the orders as they're coming in and how quickly we're managing to fulfill them and where we need to prioritize. Performance to plan is another critical one and would be by far the number one focus for the sales team. They want to see how they're progressing against the targets they've been assigned. And then obviously profitability. That would be one that would be more of a focus with our executive team, where we'd want to see where we need to focus from a profitability perspective across the different markets and the different product lines. So I guess that was the goal. In terms of the starting point on the infrastructure, it being an acquisition, we were essentially starting from scratch. So the user experience in that context would have been initially to try to deliver them information using Excel and PowerPoint. I did manage to, improve that so that they were receiving their information through interactive dashboards, but I was using Tableau's free reader product, halfway through 2019 to deliver the information. The picture on the right, I guess, is an illustration of my own experience of trying to do all of this, because without really solid infrastructure in place, in practice, what was happening was all of the data transformation to accommodate the different business logic and allocations of things that were needed was being underpinned in Excel, and due to the volume of data and all those transformations that were required, I had to effectively split the process into many large Excel files, because once you get into the 250 meg range in Excel, it's just going to fall over and not be able to handle it. So I was all too familiar with Excel's calculating Bell's message as I'd wait for it to crunch through what I was asking it to do when I was producing the information. An additional challenge was that from a data security perspective, our sales team were only to see information that was relevant to them. So because we were using just a free reader product, it meant I had to essentially create one for each member of the sales team and distribute them individually for them to get their information. So as the role involves things beyond analytics in terms of yield assessment, price grid, and a lot of other different things. Depending on competing business needs, I wouldn't have the time to dedicate solely to the report delivery every time it was needed. So it varied when the team would get their information. It could be once every week or once every 2 weeks, depending on the business needs. So that was not an ideal scenario, because there'll be times, particularly as you come to the end of the quarter, that the team will want to know, where am I right now versus target, that I need to do what needs to be done. So at a very high level, that meant there was two big challenges to solve. One was actually producing the information needed for the analytics, and the other was distributing it and getting it out to the team. So I'd been advocating for an investment in Tableau Server to solve the distribution aspect, and thanks to fantastic feedback from our commercial team on the analytics that were produced, that supported the business case to do that. So investing in Tableau Server meant I now didn't have the problem of individually sending out information to each team, because I could upload dashboards to the server online with row-level security applied, which took care of all of that. But I guess the big hurdle was the fact that the time to crunch all that data was still delaying how frequently I could deliver the information to the teams. So that is when I, after researching a number of different options earlier this year, probably around the time COVID was really, I guess, starting to kick in terms of Q1 in Europe, that was when I came across Alteryx. So when I downloaded the designer software on a trial, so my initial, I guess, objective of the trial was to basically get to play around with the tool enough to determine if it had the functionality I would need to try help me speed up the data transformation process. So I had figured, the 2-week period, that should give me enough time to figure out whether the tool was one I should look to move forward with in terms of how I might automate things. In terms of the actual experience with it, what I was not expecting to happen was that I was going to rebuild the entire ETL process effectively that I was doing with Excel within the 2-week trial period. So prior to using the Alteryx designer, I was probably looking at 2 to 3 days of working through Excel files and extracts to get to the ultimate end point in terms of the updated information for the team. Rebuilding that process entirely within Alteryx shortened that to a 3-minute runtime. So you can imagine I was quite pleased with that outcome within the 2 weeks, because it freed up so much of my time to focus on more value-adding activities with the commercial team. But it also meant I was now in a position to delivering them their information on a daily basis. So they had everything they need up to date each day when they logged in. So I'm conscious I've been talking a little about Alteryx. It might be useful to actually show a practical example of what I'm referring to. So we take a moment to load. So if this workflow here is a demo workflow, I just wanted to go, but it is, very much aligned with, we'll say, the main workflow I use for the EMEA business. But to give a high-level overview of the workflow, and then maybe a quick summary of how things work, you can see there's quite a lot going on in the workflow. The final outputs here are where I'm actually publishing the data to the Tableau server for the dashboards team. One of the features I like about Alteryx is that you can organize all your different components of workflow into containers. So it's quite easy to modify certain pieces for someone who hasn't seen the workflow before to know what's going on. So if I quickly zoom in, to just give an example, the blue boxes here are a number of different revenue sources that I'm pulling together and basically standardizing in a format to feed through the rest of the workflow. And then, because you'll have differences in naming convention and so on, for our customers, I'm using a master customer database to assign that master data to all the underlying revenue sources so that you don't have any inconsistent names of a customer across different sources. Similarly, we have to allocate the revenue by the different sales territories. So we've got a direct channel with sales teams on the ground that I assign based on logic for each particular country. We've got a distribution channel that involves separate logic. There's lots of different financial calculations being performed. I'm doing things to determine where we are from a win-loss perspective on customers. You can apply your row-level security that feeds through Tableau, and then I guess I'm able to aggregate then what is order-level information to the same level of granularity as our forecast, and combine our actual and I guess open information with what our board forecast is, what our latest estimate is, what the sales team targets were, and feed all of that through to the dashboard. So that is a high-level overview of the type of thing you do in Alteryx, and that it's all very neatly organized. And that is what was my 2 or 3 day process that runs in 2-3 minutes each day. So I guess that happened all during the trial period. So the 60 days post-trial was where I now had the time to really start looking at all the types of capabilities that I would have wanted to have delivered before, but with time constraints and even technology constraints, wasn't able to do so. So after moving ahead with Designer, I started focusing on other things that delivered. So we now have enhanced customer insights where we're able to look at our customer base in terms of how many new customers we've won within different time periods, how successful we are at retaining customers. We even create risk profiles based on the order patterns of customers to be able to identify some that have not ordered as frequent, so that the sales team pick up the phone and address that. I've also started pulling information from, we use Salesforce within the company. So now I've got visibility on our pipeline and how successful we are at converting opportunities. And I'm also using spatial techniques so that we can do some market assessment, which is something I'll go into. The other side of it is, I guess, it's facilitated a great relationship with the sales team and our executive team, because we're able to deliver them what they need when they need it. At the same time, because I got on with them, you can't be sure are they just being nice when they're saying things are great, but because I have the visibility of the usage statistics, I'm able to see that the team, going in pretty much on an everyday basis to use the tool. So that they're actually using it on a day-to-day business from a business perspective, which is fantastic. So the point I alluded to there around the spatial analytics, I mean, I've called this one a game changer because I think it just takes things to an entirely different level from an analytical perspective. So one would be the ability to geocode your customers and pinpoint them on a map. From a visual perspective, tells a far more powerful story when you're looking at things in a business review, especially when you overlay it with customers or wins or losses, which I'll give an example of. But the more advanced aspect is when you look at things like, where are we in the market? A key question that is often difficult to answer as well, are we setting appropriate targets, or how are we performing? And the only way to really get a sense of that is if you're able to have an insight to what your position in the market is. So what I've done is, in conjunction with our sales team and our marketing team, is they sourced on specific market segments information from a third party that I then was able to cross-reference our customer base with. But rather than having to engage in any manual exercise or wonder at the customer names matching, by having geocoded our customer base and then also geocoding the information from third party, I could use the spatial tools within Alteryx to cross-reference from a location perspective. And that allowed me to determine, well, of we'll call it the full market picture we obtained from the third party, what subset are already Quidel customers. So what we're looking at here is an example of, I guess, the analytics I was talking about earlier in the customer space. So this is a demo dashboard to showcase a sample of what we do. We wouldn't have the full extent of the capabilities, but essentially I've taken some of our markets in Central Europe and just randomized the business lines, and we've got a view across these markets of the customer status in terms of, in this case, looking at wins. So when we won customers, and this is all driven off the underlying logic in the earlier Alteryx workflow, where customers are grouped based on looking at their order date and when they first started. So we quickly see which customers we've won in the last 90 days, 180 days, and so on. So everything is interactive. So if I want to see what's happening in Germany, everything will update, and there you have Germany along with the bar graphs. Normally we'd have revenue numbers, tables with customer numbers and so on, but so I don't get in any trouble with commercially sensitive information. That's not here at the minute. The map itself can also serve as a filter. So if I want to zoom down to, would say, Munich, highlight Munich, everything on the bar graphs and so on will update. When we're using this in practice and we move around the map, when you hover over your customer, you'll get a lot more information in terms of customer name, who the sales rep is, revenue, and so on. So right now I don't have that there, but you can see the capability. So this is just an example of what is possible in terms of the drill down capabilities, all driven by what we've been able to do with the data set that we ultimately feed in here from the Alteryx workflows into Tableau. So I focused on the wins. We would have a corresponding dashboard when we're looking at this internally, which is basically the inverse. We look at when customers last ordered to get a sense of any customers that are at risk. So if they move beyond 90 days into other buckets where they haven't ordered, that's very easy for the sales team to quickly identify those customers that might be at risk and pick up the phone and make sure we don't lose any customers, as well as what we're out there to win customers. That's an example of the customer analytics, I guess, where I talked about the game-changing capabilities from what the spatial tools bring. This dashboard here is looking at infectious disease labs in Germany. So we would have sourced this information from a third-party provider. Right now, I've basically randomized things. So you're talking about that as ABC. But what we would actually look at internally is I've used the geocoding and cross-referencing locations to determine of the overall list of infectious disease labs in Germany that we got, which ones are already customers based on location. So color coding here and the tagging when I use this internally with teams would be, Quidel customer, pipeline, or prospect. So we've got a clear visibility on what our position is in the market and where the prospect might be. And again, it's all interactive. So if I zoom in, then Munich again, and pick the select, we'd have again other tables and metrics up here that would update when you do that. But everything is fully interactive, and you can go to any level of detail you need. So, just to show, we've got things mapped exactly to street map locations. So it's fully accurate in terms of how it's put together. So, theoretically, you could try to do some of this manually. There's not a huge volume of data here, but doing the power of doing things in Alteryx, it means you can get it done pretty much in no time at all. And also, while I may be able to tackle some things manually, if I show what's basically the equivalent dashboard looking at specialized cardiologists, when you move into thousands of cardiologists, that's not something you're really going to be able to tackle manually unless you've got a lot of resources you can throw at it. Whereas the logic in the Alteryx workflows and the spatial tools mean the volume of information involved isn't an issue. It can all be done and same principle applied, and we've got that kind of visibility for the team work. And again, while there isn't extensive information here because I've randomized it, the real dashboards internally would have contact information and names for sales reps to be able to really get moved quickly on potential prospects and start moving in the pipeline. the last example I was going to show was a particular project we're working on in the UK. So in this, I can kind of show some numbers to give a better sense of how things update. So our company would manufacture a test that for a specific condition during pregnancy that we have. Well, there's one competitor with a similar type of test, and right now the NHS is funding a project to try to get the hospitals, I guess, testing for that condition. So what we're looking at here is, again, it's randomized, but internally we would have all the hospitals that have adopted our product. We would know hospitals are currently using a competitor or have adopted a competitor, and then the other sites are effectively what's called the battleground, where they haven't adopted either yet, and we're going to see if we get to adopt our product. So here, because this information is publicly available on the NHS website, I'm looking at the birth rates across the UK, and within each of the hospitals, we would have that from the NHS. We've overlaid our own internal knowledge that the commercial team would have in terms of how likely the condition is in certain regions to be able to, I guess, associate what the test requirements be specific to each hospital and know where we need to target. But for the purposes of this exercise and demo, you can see, it's updated all the hospitals that set status A, easily get to A, B, C, and again, the map serves as the filter. So if I want to zoom in, say on London in this case, and of the, say, just under 600,000 annual births, this region in London would be accounting for just under 150,000 of those. And again, we can get to all the way down, similar to what we saw on the German example. We can get down to the street level to see, that Whips Cross University Hospital. So, I mean, that really covers, I guess, it should illustrate the powers we can put in the hands of the commercial team to get out there and drive things. This is kind of just touching on some examples. A lot more dashboards in terms of our pipeline and our internal performance metrics, performance to plan that I can't go through for commercial reasons. But essentially, we've put the power in the hands of the sales team to answer a lot of their own queries in the first instance, and obviously work to continue to try innovate and drive more change. So I think that's all I need to cover on the dashboard aspect, and hopefully it illustrates how the data gets from Alteryx into Tableau and what can be done from there. The last 30 days, if you like, of experience, which was after everything there, the migration to Alteryx server has been the next process in terms of investment. So now I've automated those workflows to run overnight, and they're fully integrated with Tableau server, which means it's essentially a full end-to-end automated process. So that's just to give an example of, that allowed me to do other things in the sense, do some changes internally. I've been asked to look at things beyond the EMEA region. So flexibility and speedy use of something like Alteryx has meant I've been able to scale up the EMEA solution, and I rolled out a similar type of platform to Latin America and Asia Pac in just 1 week, and I'm looking at something similar for India and China in the company. So, I mean, that's what has been possible with Alteryx within Quidel. So I guess concluding the business impact is that it's obviously improved the relationship across all levels and functions when you're delivering that kind of insight to teams. And when the sales team have what they need, I mean, give them the time to go out and focus on, even if you have a customer like Dr. Nick, they have the time to explain to him why he should be investing in Quidel's products to help him on his end. So that was really what I wanted to cover on how Alteryx has impacted on Quidel. So really, at this point, the only limit is the imagination. If you have the data, you're going to be able to do what you want with Alteryx. So that's really all I want to go through. So Dan, if you want to go over.
Cool. Thanks, Dara, for sharing your journey on how you leverage the Alteryx API platform and how it's helped in reducing those error-prone and brittle processes that you had before. And more importantly, that led to you actually having a tie-in with some of your wider ecosystem, working in harmony with things like your BI applications and other business users. And I suppose this all comes down to using the right platform for the right job. And I suppose because of that transparent nature of the Alteryx API platform, Dara, you could actually create transparent processes, so no, sifting through code and script, just that simplicity of visually walking through the steps so everybody could understand what's actually taken place. So being able to not only save time, but also having a better quality control and also governance on the whole analytic lifecycle. So for most organizations, the pressures of solving these challenges will only increase. You're always going to have more data, more variety of data, and growing demands from the organization. How to transform raw data into insights faster than ever before. So I suppose, how do we deal with more questions? Well, first thing we need to do is take back our 7 hours a week through analytic process automation, through more repeatable processes with clean, reliable data, and then actually investing in that hard-won time to actually level up and actually better answer questions to deliver higher value insights. As our velocity increases, we've got to keep a focus on that transparency and also the explainability. We've got to minimize, things like human error in the process through good quality, repeatable work where the analysis isn't spread across 5 or more different legacy systems. And I suppose these are the foundations for really creating a successful digital change. So with that, I want to obviously thank you all for listening today, and a big thanks to Dara for sharing his insights as well.